And welcome back to Meeting of the Minds. Today we're back with our mental health special, our mental health series. Today we're here with the great Chavez, mental health professional, who's going to give us some great information. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Gene.
Absolutely. Let's take it from the top. Talk about your experience in the mental health profession.
Yeah, so my background really originated from personal family experience with a lot of deaths. I had a father that was a alcoholic, and he was a good father and the smartest person I ever met. And I had a sibling who was an excellent wrestler, but he suffered through depression a lot, and the loss of his father, he was never able to get over it. And so that affected him to a point where it just debilitated, and both my father and my sibling committed suicide. From that point on, I went on to go to medical school for a couple of years, but my heart wasn't in it because, losing those two family members to suicide, I felt that there needed to be a change in what I did as a profession. And so I pursued mental health and doing counseling. And so I went to Texas A&M University to do counseling, both marriage and family and individual counseling. From that, I worked heavily in the mental health field, working with the homeless population. That's where I learned a lot about different aspects of mental health. I have also worked for the United States Navy, dealing with Fleet and Family Services. I've also worked for the United States Army, working with combat veterans, dealing with substance abuse, and also mental health issues with PTSD. I've been fortunate enough to do also research for NIH with Hispanic issues for several years in Washington, D.C. And, I've worked as well for Children's of Alabama, dealing with trauma and mental health abuse and sexual abuse. And currently, I am the executive director for Catholic Family Services in the Diocese of Birmingham. I've been here for 2 years, and we've been providing mental health services for everybody in the community, including Catholics within the Diocese of Birmingham and surrounding communities as well.
Absolutely, and that gets overlooked a lot, about the importance of faith when it comes to therapy, when it comes to the healing process. But a lot of people don't realize that Alcoholics Anonymous, that was founded by a religious person,
right?
And it's very, it has a lot of Christian principles. We hear that a lot in different dialectical behavioral therapy that was founded by Marsha Linehan, who was at a Jesuit school, Loyola University, and definitely used a lot of the St. Ignatius spiritual exercises to found dialectical behavioral therapy, which helps people with borderline personality disorder. Talk about the importance of that with faith in the healing process. Very overlooked these days.
Yeah, and that was the transition for myself, why I transitioned from regular mental health into more of a spiritual mental health, because you were absolutely right, is a lot of times it's overlooked at, and it's kind of something that's taboo to talk about. You get a lot of professionals that will say, I really don't want to talk about spirituality, but in effect, it affects the client, because that's a lot of the clients that we deal with have some spiritual needs. And so if you're forgetting this big piece of a person's life, it's almost not like you're not getting the complete picture. And for myself, I'm a Catholic, obviously. A lot of the clients that we serve are Catholic, but we also serve other denominations and people that don't have faith. But research shows when you have a faith-based belief system that you tend to do better with mental health issues, with depression, with anxiety, and with other aspects in life. And what we're seeing is now this shift into being more open to services that are related to the counseling with the spiritual aspect. And the other thing I have to tell a lot of my staff that have a spiritual background is it's not a bad idea to pray with the client before the session and after the session. And so I've had clients, even when I've accidentally forgotten, they'll say to me, can we pray together? And absolutely, that's where my mind is. And so when we pray, we bring another aspect of our spiritual life into the session itself.
That makes a ton of sense, and it gets so overlooked. Now, I have 2 master's degrees in psychology, and that really wasn't talked about. It always felt like something was missing. And then I
Right.
watched the Father Ripperger video, and that hit me like a slap in the face. He said, humans are composite beings. We're body and soul. Almost everyone agrees with that. Believe it or not, even a lot of atheists believe that we have a soul, even though that
Right.
doesn't make logical sense. But nonetheless, if we're saying we're body and soul, that means you have to acknowledge both aspects of the human person. Otherwise, how could we address the human needs? If there are spiritual needs and spiritual concerns, that has to be addressed. Otherwise, we can't help them holistically. Another punchline, buzzword these days, holistic improvement. But are people really working on that? And unfortunately, with Christianity, that gets swept under the rug. If we're talking about, anyone could say Zen Buddhism or mindfulness or transcendental, all this new age stuff, but heaven forbid we bring up the church or Christianity, and that kind of gets shunned. What's that all about?
That's another thing that counselors that do feel comfortable with providing counseling in a spiritual aspect is there needs to be more advocacy. And I've been, unfortunately, at employers where counseling was not appropriate with the spiritual aspect. And so it was hard for me as a person who's spiritual and who's Catholic to want to help that person with their spiritual needs, but being told that I can't do that. And I think it goes back to separation of church and state and separation of church and in business. And for a lot of us who have that spiritual desire and that spiritual need, it's important to, like you said, you can't have one without the other. And again, it's I was just recently on a Zoom meeting with the Alabama Counseling Association, and we had several different speakers speak to that specific topic, which it's okay as a counselor to bring up spirituality. It's okay to ask them, where are they in their spiritual life, even if they're atheists? Because like I alluded to earlier, research shows there is a longer lasting effect of counseling if there's a spiritual belief in the background. And, for myself, I constantly talk to my clients about spirituality, but I also believe that when you have that faith-based belief system, when the counselor's not around or the helper's not around, you could go to the higher power or your belief system that is spiritual in nature that can help you through this process. Because me as a counselor isn't going to be in your home at 10 o'clock at night. Whereas if I have the ability through the counseling session to say, when you're struggling and I'm not available, it's okay to you to go to God and to pray about some intercession and assistance with the matter.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. And it's certainly not saying that we're using that as an opportunity we're not trying to capitalize on the weak or evangelize. Though sometimes that comes up. That's not the point, to push our religious beliefs on people.
Yeah.
But it can't be looked at as taboo to ask, are you a religious person? What are your ultimate beliefs? What do you believe about God? What do you believe about the afterlife? What do you believe it means to be a person? In my mind, we sweep under those because it seems like it's taboo. We sweep that under the rug. And those ultimate questions drive every action we take, every decision we make. So I think we do need to start talking about those ultimate questions. And it's certainly not to be in an invasive or a pressuring way.
Yeah, and to that topic, where we're seeing is a lot of faith-based students. That is a need that they're asking and they're yearning for. And what we're also seeing is that if they don't have, counselor or some mental health specialist or psychiatrist there to help them along the way, we see a lot of spiritual growth, but then it almost flattens out because they have this high, but don't understand it eventually levels out. And, it's important for them to engage a professional to say, hey, that's normal, that's okay. But if me as the student that we're seeing, like at UAB University here, which is one of the major medical research hospitals in the United States, we get a lot of their students that come in and they're struggling spiritually because they have a higher desire and want to grow. But that growth has to come in with some also assistance from a priest or their pastor or whatever, and also the mental health field as well to assist them. And you talked about that afterlife. We're currently helping a couple clients with that same thought process. Is they struggle with the understanding of the afterlife. But if you're having to deal with this on your own, it's like it's too much to handle. And so us as professionals should not be afraid. And if we don't have the feeling of the competency, we can get additional training. We can reach out to colleagues and ask. But again, I think there needs a lot of advocacy that's been going on that needs to happen.
Right, and people are looking for it. We know because they're seeking out the spiritual in different places, in the wrong places. Reiki, yoga, healing stones, superstitions, rocks, all kinds of other ways. So you can't suppress the need for the spiritual because we're part soul.
Right.
And I think it's in Proverbs or Ecclesiastes where they say you've put eternity into our hearts. We have that craving for the infinite. So if you have an infinite cup, you cannot fill the infinite cup with finite matter. And that's what we're trying to do a lot. That leads to the addictions or different struggles. We're trying to fill an infinite cup with finite matter. And it's not to say matter's bad. We're not talking about Manichaeism, Gnosticism, or Puritanicalism, but there's another part to us other than just the body.
And it also is important that it comes from the parents as well. What we're seeing is that spiritual growth and that spiritual awareness is important to be instilled from the parents. But again, there's a lot of fear that if they do that, that won't be accepted by the general population. And I'll give you my example with my two little boys. We constantly, prior to COVID, would pray before the match and after the match. And what I would always say to them is, you do your best and God will do the rest. And so they understand the importance of the spirituality with all aspects of their life, including their athletic part of life, because it's always good to praise the Lord and God, to thank Him for the physical abilities that He's given us. And we know, about wrestling is you don't win them all, and you can't always be the best. You can try to achieve the best, but there's always going to be somebody better, or for whatever that moment is, another athlete's at a higher level at that moment. And the thing about wrestling is that it teaches you all avenues of life. And one thing that you asked me about my professional career, I wouldn't be where I am professionally if it wasn't for wrestling, because it taught me never to give up. It taught me perseverance. It taught me that if I fail, I get back up and go again and push myself. And for myself and my kids, wrestling is another aspect that is helping us to get through this time and understand that spirituality and the well-being is all important.
Absolutely. Oh, that's great. And just tying that all in with sports. And I think that it's, especially with a sport like wrestling, but really all sports,
right?
It's so all encompassing. Like I used the word holistic before. It's mind, it's body, it's your conditioning, your strength training, your nutrition, your rest and your recovery. So I think a lot of times the sports, that can and should be an avenue to God, because it makes us ask those ultimate questions, those self-searching, those self-probing questions. We were watching the Jordan Burroughs David Taylor match last night, and my wife noticed during the interviews, she's like, "Wow, a lot of wrestlers talk about God." Joey Banana was wearing a Jesus shirt, and I said, "Yeah, it's just such a tough sport that you ask yourself, why am I doing this? What's this all about?" Because you're right, you don't win them all, even when you're a great wrestler.
Yeah, and to that effect too, we also know that it's really good to learn at a very young age that the ultimate goal should not be to get this big medal or this big trophy, because it's only fleeting for a moment. And when you have that, if you don't have a search for something else, it's going to give you this empty feeling. And it's important for wrestlers just in general to come to that conclusion, that my goal should not be competing against this other this competitor. I'm competing against myself to achieve the best I can at the sport. And like you said, you know, there's always going to be somebody better, and always going to somebody that might beat you. But if we look at it, is I'm not competing against that person. I'm competing against myself and what level I can get to. You'll see a lot of success. And the other part to that is that when a wrestler finishes wrestling, I've read several different discussions about this, is that, you know, the ultimate goal is that Olympics and getting this medal. And once they get to that point, if that has always been their goal, it's almost like a letdown, because what's next? What's next? And the goal should be is not this Olympic medal, but just improve as a person, improve as an individual in all aspects of life. Because if you have that, it won't matter after the Olympics. Not to say that that's not a big accomplishment, but there's more meaning to life than just wrestling. And you know, what wrestling also does teach you is teamwork and family. And it's always interesting to watch a lot of the competitors that after the match, a lot of times they engage that same person that were wrestling to win a championship or whatever, and they become friends. And a lot of times they're long-lasting friends for a lifetime. And it's interesting to see that at the moment that they're competing, they're the competitors, but once they're done, a lot of times they become friends.
Right. No, those are great points, Oz. It really is so true that we really need to make sure we're looking at the big picture, and that just the spirit, the mind, the body, it all plays together. It all works together, and you can't separate them. St. Augustine, I think, as you were speaking, so many thoughts popping up in my head. I think you've made us for yourself, O Lord. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you. So we know we're always going to have that craving. To your point, Valentin Kalika spoke about this after Helen Maroulis won an Olympic championship, and they learned that there was a thing called post-Olympic blues after they've reached the pinnacle. And I know there's writers that spoke about this. We find God, or we realize we have a certain yearning for God in our greatest moments. A lot of times we meet God when we're at our lowest, but sometimes it's in our greatest moments, because what else? Isn't there more? And my wife has her doctorate in genetics. She said it was a similar thing. After getting her PhD, at a certain point, the PhD becomes the goal, and then you get it, and you're like, well, now what? So we're seeing that with Olympic champions and PhD students, and it's sometimes just keeping it in perspective. And just one last point, because you have my mind going with all this, and that's, you have that perspective. When you have that full perspective on what it's all about, not only are you on the right path, but it's and mental health wise, but also it's going to help you compete better, which is a far second to the mental health. But compete better because you're not going to have all the pressure on you. If my identity is wrapped up in the wins and the losses, that's a lot of pressure from just a mental point of view.
Yeah, and to that effect, you know, going back to this, I'm competing against myself. Well, that's an easier thought process than I'm competing against this person to get this goal, which is this medal or this championship or this #1 ranking. And once you get to that point, like you said, it's always like, well, there's more and I want more, but that even at that point, it's never enough. So if you come back to, why am I doing this? I do this because I enjoy this. I like this. I like the camaraderie. I like helping somebody else. You know, I always tell my older son, his name's Wyatt, I said, Wyatt, you know, one of the best gifts you can give to the wrestling and other kids is teach them a move or help them, because by doing that, you're not only sowing a seed for them, you're teaching yourself something about yourself and that individual that you maybe didn't realize. You know, the other part to the competition, I think a lot of athletes overlook, is a lot of the reward really doesn't come from the competition. It comes from the preparation of the competition. It's the work that you've done. Because if you look back at when people win these awards, they have these racing thoughts of, you know, I did this to get there. You know, I had to, you know, do this workouts. I had to eat healthy. I had to, you know, not go to hang out with all these friends to party, or I had to, you know, set aside some time to do extra workouts after practice. But that dedication not only transitions for that time, but it also helps form that person as they grow into adults. And then once the wrestling career is over, where they're actually competing, it translates into situations within like family situations. They can remember, the struggling of feeling like I'm never going to be able to beat this person. And so it translates when, you're arguing with your spouse. This too shall pass, because I was able to get through it over here with wrestling. I can get through it with my wife in this situation, whatever the situation is. Or as a business perspective, I constantly deal with different entities and groups, and sometimes better than others. What we learn is that you learn to work around certain difficulties, because what you've learned in wrestling, you learn to face those adversities and work around those. And it's kind of like if you lose to the same guy several times in a wrestling match, you eventually figure out different ways to attack that individual. And in life is the same principle. Is if it keeps on failing in a certain way, then maybe you need to go out from a different perspective. So.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And that's what's missing a lot of times with these athletes. What are some of the biggest, maybe mental mistakes you see these athletes make?
I think you hit it earlier, which is they put a lot of pressure on the win. And if they were able to mentally separate the win from the participation itself, I think it would reduce a lot of the stressor. And we know that when a person is, let's say, ruminating about, I've wrestled this guy before, he's beat me by 5 points, he's probably going to beat me again. My dad's yelling at me in the background that I shouldn't have lost as a kid. My coach is saying these things to me. Well, that's a lot of pressure. But if you say, you know what, regardless if I win or if I lose, as long as I give my best, that's the most important part. And it doesn't matter if it's mom, dad, the coach, as long as you gave your most effort, that's the important part. And the other aspect to remember, and we talked a little bit about this at the beginning, is mental health is so tied into an individual's well-being. So let's say if you're struggling in schoolwork, well, you go to practice, your mind may not be at practice or might not even be in the competition, because you're worried about the results of the schoolwork. And not to say schoolwork is important, obviously, but what I'm saying is the stressor of that will affect the person's ability to compete. And we also know that if we're having familial issues, what we're seeing right now with COVID, a lot of things that are occurring that normally didn't occur to the extent that they are occurring now. And so what happens is the person is pinning up these emotions and they're not getting them out. Athletes are not any different. A lot of athletes feel like they have to, even female athletes feel like they have to be the best. And if I show any sign of weakness, then I'm not the best. But in order for a person to be a true, the altruistic person, it's okay to cry about, not being able to do something. It's okay to have these fears, and it's okay to talk about them. It's okay to talk to them with your coach, your professor, your family, a counselor, even your wrestling mates or your other athletes that compete in the same sport that you're doing. It's okay to bring those out, because if you don't bring them out in this, like we saw with this Texas high school football player that went out and tackled the referee, more than likely that student and that athlete had a lot of issues going on, and this was the easy target. But I can almost guarantee you he had a lot of problems that he wasn't dealing with, and this was an issue. And we even see this in athletic sports, where there's an actual competition and something doesn't go right in the event, and then the athlete hits another athlete or hits a referee or takes it out on somebody else afterwards. But if it's important for them to get those emotions out in a healthy way via communication and the feeling words, a lot of times we say that we act out our emotions. And if we can express those emotions like, hey, Gene, I'm upset with you because you didn't call me at 10 o'clock, that is healthier than me just, giving you the cold shoulder or not interacting with you because you know what's going on.
That's right. That's great. And that's why I want people to look at addressing mental health, addressing mindset, addressing emotions. That's a sign of strength. That's actually to your credit when you do that, because I get it. There are a lot of athletes and people who are successful that suppress things. They don't talk about it. They act tough, but there's something else going on. And the big picture is what we want for people. I know we're on the same page here. We want to see people happy. We want to see people successful. And most important, we want to see them good, moral people. So it's happiness, it's success, and most importantly, being a good person. And you might get that level of success, but you're not happy.
Right.
You might get that level of success, but you're not operating with good moral character, with virtue. Well, what good is that? So looking at focusing on mental health, emotions, our mindset, that's a strength. If you're struggling with technique in a sport, you ask the coach, hey, coach, what can I do in this situation? And people look at that person as a good athlete, as a good student of the sport. If I'm weak in a certain area for my squat or my bench press, I go to a strength coach. Hey, coach, I can't bench any more weight. What can I do? And they give me the answer. And that's to my credit. Oh, look at Gene. He's a very strong or very intelligent person asking the question. Well, why don't we look at it the exact same way when it comes to our mindset? We go to a professional. We go to a counselor, a therapist, to yourself, and say, hey, I'm struggling in this area. What can I do? We should look at that as a mentally tough person, as an intelligent person. It's the same thing. No difference.
Yeah, and I think the stigma is important to bring up, like you're doing right now, because a lot of athletes in general suffer through depression and suffer through anxiety and have other issues. And you hit it right on the spot where you can be the most successful person and be the most unhappy person. And it doesn't matter how much money you have or how much accolades you have. If you are not in a right frame of reference, that's not going to do you any good. And so it's important, like you said, just like these other activities where you reach out for help, mental health is as crucial and is as important as those other areas. Because we know, and research shows this, if you are not in a good frame of reference mentally, you get sick more, you have more injuries, you have more familial issues, you have more arrests, you have more scholastic issues, you have just a variety of different problems. And if you start addressing those, you will see a reduction in some of the symptomology and also some of the medical issues and other issues if you address those issues. But I think it's important what you're doing, Gene, is to bring this to the forefront because even with wrestling mindset and mindset in general, it's good to teach all these things for wrestling, but it has to be for the long lasting, because if not, it's only going to help you for wrestling.
Right.
But if we pursue this from just a general person, you're going to help this individual for the rest of their life. And I had a wrestling coach. I'll just share this story. I had this wrestling coach. His name is Eldon Brandenburg, and I grew up in a small town in Dodge City, Kansas, and I wrestled for Dodge City High School. And he used to tell me, and it's so interesting, like I grew up in a very poor area where gangs were involved and stuff like that. And he was constantly giving me a lot of positive prompting, saying, what are you wanting in life? What are your desires? And he never would say, okay, if you want this championship, this is what it's going to be. But what it was really sowing in my mind was healthy coping skills, healthy desires that I need to do with life. And it wasn't until an event that I got in trouble at school. And he said, is this what you want for life? And I said, no. He goes, well, then you need to change the way you process things and the way you do things and the way you interact. And basically he was dealing with, telling me is the way I view situations or the way I think, mental health stuff, that it will affect all aspects of my life. And once I was able to grasp that and also get help from a mentor like him and other individuals in my life, that transformed me as an individual so that when things would come up, I knew that I could go to this individual and process some of my feelings. And if I'm not able to process those feelings, they come out in very negative actions. And what we're seeing, and you know this, a lot of collegiate teams are now looking for a well-rounded athlete that works well with his fellow athletes. Because if you have, and I don't want to say one bad seed, if you have an athlete that is struggling emotionally, it's very detrimental to the whole team. And so if you don't help that individual, eventually, whether you keep him there or go somewhere else, he's going to have the same issues. So why not help that athlete while the person's there? And if, a letter team, obviously there has to be consequences, but, so important when we're struggling mentally, it's not because we intended to do these things or we intended to be depressed. It's just we don't have those coping skills. And if they learn these coping skills, it will transpire in other areas of their life.
Absolutely. And that's what sports are at their best. It's using the sports or any activity someone's involved in, even if they never become an athlete, it's using sports as a vehicle to build virtue and to build mental skills and these life lessons really for life. So it's sports, it's school, it's your career, it's your entire life. And knowing that all those, the science is all behind it, the correlations are there. As I said before, the people who are more religious, who have a sense of purpose, who go to, a house of worship regularly, they're living longer and they're living happier.
Right,
so
right.
That's all there. And then people who are addressing the mental health concerns, they're living happier, they're living healthier. We said how that connects in even with performance. When you understand your why and your purpose, you're not basing your success, you're not basing your identity on success or failure. And knowing that it's all tied together, the correlations are there, the science supports it. And I look at it like this, back to what you said before about a lot of times that separation of church and state, that separation of God and the rest of our life, which people look at as a good thing. That's a terrible thing.
Yeah, it's not a good thing.
It's a logical impossibility, because if you might be able to separate the carpenter from the chair he makes. Why? Because the carpenter makes the chair of wood and nails. So the carpenter could make that chair, step away from the chair, and the chair is on its own. But God made the universe out of nothing, which means he holds everything by his grace and existence at all times. So God cannot separate himself from the universe. Otherwise, you don't have the universe, because there's no matter that holds it together other than God's grace. And we don't examine that a lot of times. So we can't separate our faith. We are mind, body, and spirit, and we have to address all of them.
Yeah, and the other part, that's why I send my kids to a Catholic school, is because I know the importance of our faith in our everyday life. And when I'm struggling, that is the first person I go to, is my faith, my higher being, God as I know him, the Holy Spirit, the Trinity. I know that that's going to be constant. And if you grow in your spiritual life, that's going to be your number one source of comfort. And for a lot of us that don't understand this, that's even above family, above our spouse, is our spiritual life, because we will always, people are made to fail, meaning in relationships. So no one's perfect. And so when you're interacting with people, they're going to do something that you don't like. But with your spiritual life, that is a constant. That is never going to be going away if you have that aspect. And if you don't have that, I encourage people to reach that out. It's okay, and I'm going to be honest with you. Growing up, my parents would send us to every church you can imagine, Protestant, Mennonite, even though we were Catholic, but our parents wanted to see all aspects of life. But what that gave me is a greater understanding of loving my fellow human, but it also gave me an understanding that we all want the same thing. We all want happiness. We all want to be successful. We all want a better life. And it's important for us to realize, like you said, you can't separate anything from our spiritual life. And when we come to a conclusion that is true as individuals, because you can't force somebody to understand something until they come to that conclusion from learning or experience. But what we see is once they have that grasp, there's nothing that they can't do. And you said it, when you hear athletes after their competition, they're like, thank God. But you know what, and you know this feeling is, as you're getting this win or whatever, a lot of times we think of, this is what I did to get there. And you're not even thinking that how to actually win. You're thinking how you got there. And but it goes back to the building blocks of who you are as an individual. And it's so important for athletes and individuals to explore their faith as they know their faith. And like you were talking about AA, AA often says, know God as you know him, whatever that is to you. Now, hopefully, as the person develops, it gets to what we know God as in a healthier way. But you have to start somewhere. And, with the mental health part is we often exclude God from our problems. And we see this a lot, is that why wouldn't it be the first person you go to is God? Right. If Gene can't fix it, Oz can't fix it, your parents can't fix it, your coach can't fix it, you know who's left is God. But if we went to God first, that would save us so much relief and pain. Because even myself, and I'll be the first one to tell you, my wife has to remind me sometimes when I'm struggling with something at work or with a client or something. She's like, "Well, have you prayed about it?" I was like, I should know that.
The elusive obvious.
When you like, oh, you're right, because I can't fix everything, and nor did God intend me to fix everything. We are not God, and we're not supposed to try to resolve everybody's problems. Our goal in life is to help others and to try to do our best to lift our fellow man. And if we can put our problems on God and let him do the fixing, we would resolve a lot of the issues that we have.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. That's great stuff, Oz. I really appreciate it. How do we send more people your way? Websites, any social media?
Yeah. So the email, the website that we have is cfsbhm.org. And it doesn't matter if it's anywhere in the United States. Even athletes that may be looking at mental health issues, I would make myself available for free consultation. And if they want somebody in the local area, we can refer them to that area as well. And they can also find us on Facebook. And what I can do, Gene, is forward you that information. But it's CFSBHM Facebook.com. And also on Instagram as well. But I'll forward you that information if you want to post that with the video. And just to give you the number that here at Catholic Family Services, our phone number is area code 205-324-6561. Again, the number is 205-324-6561. And it doesn't matter where you are in the United States. And the good thing about our organization, Gene, is that money's not an issue as far as being able to get resources and help. I always tell, a lot of organizations, don't let the financial be a burden for you getting help. We'll make it work. And right now, what we're dealing with COVID right now is so many families are struggling. So many athletes are struggling because a lot of people are getting locked up inside the house or doing virtual classes, and we're missing that face-to-face contact. But there's ways around that we can try to work through in the meantime. And I think, Gene, you're God blessing to everybody that you come across with. And I pray that the Lord continues to bless you in all that you're doing. And this topic about mental health and spirituality are very close to my heart. And I think you need to continue to pursue it because it's an underlying stigmatic issue that a lot of people do not want to approach that topic, but so many of us suffer with it.
Definitely, you did a great job covering it today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
God bless you. God bless your family. We'll throw the links to all those, everything you said in the show notes.
All right. Well, again, God bless you. And if you want to talk again, we'll talk again, Gene.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right. Thank you.